The void of space stretched infinitely, a silent witness to the bloodshed that had scarred countless worlds. The stealth transport glided toward its destination, its engines whisper-quiet in the darkness. Inside, the Hellbringers sat in grim silence, their armor scuffed from battles past, their weapons checked and rechecked. Raylan's visor flickered as a secure transmission came through. The voice on the other end was distorted but urgent. "They know you're coming." The line went dead. His gut twisted. A warning this late into the operation meant only one thing: intel had failed them. He turned to his squad. "We stick to the plan. Fast in, fast out." No one questioned him. This wasn't their first suicide mission. The drop ramp hissed open, revealing the desolate colony below. Once a thriving human settlement, it was now a graveyard. Broken buildings stood like tombstones under the eerie glow of distant fires. The silence wasn't just unnatural, it was hostile. The squad moved in tight formation, scanning their surroundings. The dust beneath their boots carried traces of old blood, remnants of those who had died here before. The mission was simple: disable the Dravari communications array and retreat before reinforcements arrived. Vex knelt beside a rusted-out vehicle, his scanner pulsing blue. No movement. But something's off. This place should be crawling with patrols. Kellen, the team sniper, adjusted his scope. No patrols, no guards. Either they're overconfident, or... A faint, unnatural hum filled the air. Raylan held up a fist. The team froze. The hum grew into a steady pulse, resonating through the ruins like a heartbeat. Then they saw it: bodies. Not Dravari, but humans. Freshly killed. Their armor bore the insignia of another squad. Arya swore under her breath. These guys were sent before us. They didn't make it. Raylan's pulse quickened. We need to move. Now. They pressed forward, navigating through the ruins with heightened awareness. The target was a fortified structure at the colony's center. They reached it with little resistance, which only worsened Raylan's unease. Vex patched into the security grid, his fingers flying over his wrist console. This system's been altered. Someone, he stopped, his visor reflecting a sudden data spike. The air grew thick with an electric charge. Then, a low, guttural growl echoed from the shadows. The trap had been sprung. Dark figures emerged from the ruins, Dravari soldiers, their exoskeletons gleaming under the dim light. Hundreds of them. Their weapons hummed to life, plasma barrels glowing with lethal energy. Raylan didn't hesitate. Defensive positions. Hold the line. The first wave charged. Plasma fire erupted, painting the battlefield in flashes of blue and orange. The Hellbringers returned fire with brutal precision, dropping enemies with each shot. Kellen's rifle cracked, sending a Dravari sprawling. Arya's turrets whirred, cutting through the swarm. But for every enemy they felled, more took their place. Raylan ducked behind cover as a plasma bolt scorched past his helmet. He looked at his squad, outnumbered, outgunned, and backed into a corner. Yet, not one of them hesitated. Not one of them wavered. This wasn't just a battle. This was a last stand. The Hellbringers fought with everything they had, but the enemy pressed in, relentless and unyielding. Plasma fire illuminated the ruins, casting monstrous shadows as the Dravari advanced. Each fallen warrior was replaced by another, their numbers seemingly endless. The squad had seen impossible odds before, but this time, something was different. This time, there was no escape. Raylan reloaded, his fingers moving on instinct. "Keep pushing forward." His voice cut through the chaos, but even he knew they weren't moving fast enough. The mission had changed. They weren't here to destroy the enemy's communications anymore. They were here to make sure humanity knew what was coming. Vex took cover beside him, blood trickling down the side of his face. "We're running low on everything." Arya's turrets were nearly out of ammo, their barrels glowing red from overheating. Kellen's sniper shots had slowed. He was conserving, choosing only the most critical targets. But the Dravari weren't giving them time to breathe. The air shifted. A sound, low and unnatural, vibrated through the battlefield. It wasn't just another wave of soldiers. It was something worse. Then they saw it. A towering Dravari war beast, its exoskeleton pulsing with energy, moved through the ruins with calculated steps. Unlike the juggernaut they had already faced, this one wasn't charging in blindly. It was observing, assessing. It was intelligent. Raylan tightened his grip on his rifle. "We need to bring it down now." Kellen took the shot, a perfect hit to the beast's head, except the round disintegrated against its armor. It barely reacted. Instead, it raised a massive energy cannon mounted on its arm. The warning came too late. The blast struck their cover, sending Raylan and Vex flying. His helmet's HUD flickered, systems failing as he hit the ground hard. His ears rang, the world spinning around him. Through the smoke, he saw Arya struggling to pull herself up. Kellen was pinned beneath rubble, his sniper rifle shattered. Vex was unmoving. The beast stepped forward, its heavy footfalls making the ground tremble. It had studied them. It had learned. And now, it was going to finish them. Raylan forced himself to stand, his body screaming in protest. His rifle was gone, but his knife was still there. Useless, but it didn't matter. If this was how it ended, he would make them bleed for every inch. But then, the unexpected happened. A deafening explosion struck the war beast from above. A missile, fired from an unseen source, smashed into its back, sending it crashing to the ground. Raylan turned his gaze skyward. Through the smoke and fire, a new fleet of dropships descended. Reinforcements. But not from the main fleet. These were soldiers who had seen the Hellbringers fight. Who had watched their struggle through real-time feeds. Who had refused to stand by. They had come. The battlefield shifted instantly. Human forces stormed in, the tide turning. Raylan awoke to the rhythmic beeping of a monitor. His body felt heavy, wrapped in bandages and painkillers. The sterilites above flickered slightly, casting shadows over the med bay. He tried to sit up, but a sharp pain in his ribs stopped him. A medic noticed his movement. "Easy, Commander. You've been out for 2 days." Memory crashed into him like a tidal wave. The mission. The battle. His squad. He swallowed hard. The Hellbringers. The medic hesitated. That pause told him everything. Raylan turned away, staring at the wall. Gone. All of them. His fists clenched, nails digging into his palms. They had fought, bled, and died, alone. And now, he was the only one left to remember them. A voice interrupted his thoughts. They didn't die for nothing. Raylan looked up. A high-ranking officer stood at the foot of his bed, uniform pristine, expression unreadable. The mission was a success. The Dravari communications array was destroyed. You delayed their assault long enough for us to launch a counterstrike. Raylan exhaled slowly. It didn't feel like a victory. It felt like survival. The officer continued. The footage from your armor cams was recovered. It's spreading across the fleet. The Hellbringers' last stand is already legend. Raylan's throat tightened. A legend won't bring them back. No. But it will make the enemy afraid. The screen beside his bed flickered to life. Footage played, the battle, his squad fighting against impossible odds, refusing to surrender. Their deaths, brutal and unrelenting, but never in vain. It ended with him, kneeling in the dirt, defiant even in his final moments. The broadcast was already making waves. Across the fleet, soldiers watched, fists tightening, jaws clenching. Fury burned in their eyes. Humanity had lost heroes, but gained something far more powerful. Resolve. The officer studied him. High Command has authorized Operation Vengeance. We're taking the fight to them. No more defensive lines. No more waiting. His voice hardened. We end this war. Raylan's heart pounded. The Hellbringers had been sacrificed, but their deaths had ignited a fire no enemy could extinguish. A transmission was being sent to the Dravari. The footage of the battle. Every moment of it. Every death. The final message was simple. You thought you could break us. But we are only getting started. The Dravari would watch. They would see what humanity was willing to endure. What they were willing to do. And they would know fear. Raylan slowly sat up, pain forgotten. The war wasn't over. The real battle had just begun. The Hellbringers were gone. But their legacy would burn forever. The war drums of humanity had been struck, and there was no turning back. Across the fleet, soldiers prepared for battle with renewed fury. The Hellbringers' last stand had become more than just a tragic story, it was a call to arms. Every soldier who watched that footage saw what had been lost, and what had been gained. The Dravari had underestimated them. They had thought humanity weak, breakable. That illusion was shattered. Now, the enemy knew the truth. Humans did not fear death. They embraced it when necessary. And that made them unstoppable. Raylan stood on the observation deck of the flagship, the bruises on his body fading, but the scars inside him permanent. Below, the hangar was alive with movement, troops loading weapons, drop ships preparing for launch, the scent of oil and steel thick in the air. The fleet had changed. This was no longer a defensive force. It was a vengeful hammer, ready to strike with righteous fury. A familiar voice pulled him from his thoughts. "They're waiting for you." He turned. A young officer, barely out of training, stood at attention. She wore the insignia of the Hellbringers on her shoulder. A new recruit, but already carrying the weight of those who had come before. Raylan followed her down the corridor, past soldiers who straightened at his presence. Some saluted. Others simply watched, silent respect in their eyes. The Hellbringers were gone, but their memory lived on. The briefing room was packed. Commanders, strategists, and war-hardened veterans filled the space, holographic maps flickering over the table. They all turned as Raylan entered. A general gestured to the display. "We've tracked the Dravari fleet. Their command station is within striking distance. They're regrouping, expecting us to lick our wounds." His expression hardened. "We're not giving them the chance." The plan was brutal in its simplicity, an overwhelming strike, no mercy, no retreat. The Dravari had taken too much. Now, it was humanity's turn to take everything. Raylan studied the map. He had no doubts, no hesitation. "When do we launch?" The general gave a grim smile. "We're already en route." There was nothing left to say. The meeting dispersed, soldiers moving with sharp efficiency. Raylan lingered for a moment, staring at the map. He could almost hear them, Arya, Vex, Kellen. Their voices, their laughter, their last words. He wouldn't fail them. Hours later, the fleet emerged from slipspace. The enemy station loomed ahead, their defenses scrambling too late. The order was given. Drop pods rained down, ships unleashed their payloads, and the void was filled with the fire of retribution. Raylan led the charge. His boots hit the ground, rifle raised, heart steady. Around him, his new squad moved with precision, trained in the legacy of those who had come before. The Dravari fought back, but their strikes were weaker now. Their confidence had been shattered, their fear palpable. The Hellbringers had died, but their sacrifice had broken something in the enemy, something that could never be repaired. Raylan cut through the battlefield, his movements automatic, his focus absolute. Every enemy he struck down was one step closer to justice. By the time the battle was over, the Dravari stronghold lay in ruins. Fires raged, bodies littered the corridors. The war wasn't finished, but this was a beginning. A turning point. Raylan stood at the edge of the wreckage, looking up at the human fleet above. Somewhere out there, the Dravari were watching. And they knew now, humanity did not forgive. Humanity did not forget. The Hellbringers were gone. But their war had only just begun.